Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today I'm going to be filming a recommendation video that I've been trying to figure out how I wanted to film for the last year or so. So bear with me, because this is going to be a little experimentary, if that makes any sense. So, if you've seen by the title, I wanted to go with If You Like Dungeon Crawler Carl. I will say these are not other lit RPGs if that is what you are here for. I'm not your person. This is the only lit RPG that I've read. I have, however, read a lot of sci-fi in my time, both in my life in general, but also here on Booktube. So, and I don't think I've ever made a dedicated sci-fi recommendation video of any kind. And Dungeon Crawler Carl is very much sci-fi, but in a lit RPG format, which tends to lean more fantasy in a lot of ways. But I'm going to go with the sci-fi ones for this video. I think I have 10 or so. Some of them are going to be a stretch, but if you want to get into more sci-fi in general and you're not somebody who is very well versed on that subject, I feel like this could give you a few ideas. So stick around if you're interested in that. And I would really appreciate it if you could go hit the like button and subscribe down below, because I have a lot more recommendation videos coming, especially for Pride Month. I will have a lot of Pride recommendation videos coming up here in the month of June, so you might want to stick around and go like and interact with the video in some way, shape, or form. I would really appreciate it. Some of these are going to be like First Contact. Some of them are like higher, hard sci-fi. Some of them are cozy sci-fi. Some are verging between fantasy and sci-fi depending on how you want to look at it, which I read a lot of that particular like subgenre of the twist and the combination of the two. And then I also have some musical recommendations at the end. If you're a STARKID fan, you know what I'm going to recommend if you talk about sci-fi. So the first book I'm going to recommend is The Measure by Nikki Erlich. I just read this one if you've been on my channel for a minute or you're not new here. I just read this in a vlog. I will leave that vlog link down below, but this is the story of a world in which a singular box has ended up on every single person's doorstep. That we find out later it is every person over the age of 22, and the length of the string inside the box is the length of your life. And it goes through all the science of how scientists figure out how to guesstimate how long people are going to live. I feel like it's a very good depiction of how people would actually react in this situation. And we follow, I think, 4 or 5 perspectives of different people in different places. It also is very technical in the sense of how the boxes work, and like you only get them when you turn 22. It appears on your doorstep. Even people who are homeless had appeared outside their encampments. People who were like on a plane, there's a perspective of somebody who's on a plane at the beginning of when this first initially happens, and it appears on the person's doorstep at home, and they don't even hear about it until they get off the plane. One thing I feel like a lot of sci-fi things are good at doing is giving real world examples of how things could actually happen. And this one in particular really reminded me of a lot of sci-fi books that I read back in like the 2020 era when I was reading a lot of like standalone sci-fi. This reminded me very much of that, and I think this is an excellent representation of the genre. If you're somebody who's like scared of hard sci-fi or like higher brow sci-fi in which there's a lot of space things, this is not that. This is very much real world contemporary with a sci-fi like little twist thrown in. Next up, I'd like to recommend We Have Reached the End of Our Show by Ali Gordon. This is a book written by a member of Team STARKID. If you've been here for a minute, I also went to Ali's book signing and everything, so if you want to hear me talk more about that, I have a full review for the book itself down below when I read the arc for it, as well as a vlog of me meeting Ali at her book signing in LA. And this is the story of a couple who live in New York City. One of them has a terminal illness and or has already been given a death day of when they are expected to live until. And then our other member has escaped a religious cult. So there was a lot of talk about religion here, specifically Mennonite culture, if you're interested in specifics when it comes to like church cults, as I am. But the sci-fi twist to this is there is a meteor that is coming to Earth that is going to cause the Earth to go into an ice age or end very abruptly in 28 days. And the story follows those two characters with a bunch of flashbacks of how they got to the place that they are, as well as a cousin of one of our main characters who all 3 of them end up going on a road trip trying to make it back to family across the country before the end of the world. This is honestly one of my favorite apocalyptic stories I've read in years. It was one of my favorite books of last year. I ended up reading it twice, and I'm not a big rereader. If you've been here for a minute, you know that about me. And I feel like it's severely underhyped for how good it is. So I will always recommend that one when it comes to sci-fi. Next up, I have Bury Your Gaze. This is one of the ones that somewhat fluctuates between sci-fi and fantasy. This is the story of a writer for a TV show. He lives out in Los Angeles and he writes a lot of queer characters because he himself is queer. And one day he goes to his executive's office and his executive wants him to kill off one of the main queer characters in his big TV show. And he has to decide if he's going to give up the contract or if he's going to allow them to do that to one of his characters, something he's not particularly interested in doing, mainly because he doesn't want to become the queer stereotype in a lot of Hollywood content in which the term bury your gaze comes from, of a gay character always has to be killed off or like they can never have a happily ever after. But the more sci-fi, like almost horror twist to this one is that while he's trying to make this decision, he becomes haunted by some of his old characters who have somehow made it into our realm, and him figuring out how that is humanly possible and trying to stop them. This does take a really weird, trippy ending. If you've read Chuck Tingle before, you know how a lot of his books go. It's very similar to all of his other ones. And I compare this one to Dungeon Crawler Carl, not so much in the like sci-fi aspect, but in the it's very much everyday real world, but with a weird twist that has to do with something that should not be possible in the realm of the world as we understand it today. Which is also going to go the same for the next book that I have to recommend, and that is When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. I love Nat Cassidy. This is one of my favorites of his, and this one I want to recommend in a very, very vague way because I don't like to give spoilers on this book. I feel like the best way to go into this book is completely blind, not knowing anything about the actual subject. You're told that there's a girl, she finds a boy, and the boy is being chased by what she believes is his father, who is some sort of wolf creature. And the story just kind of takes off and takes a very strange turn from there. But the reason I recommend this one in a Dungeon Crawler Carl recommendation is because it's very much a story that sounds fun from the premise, but takes a very completely unexpected turn and becomes so much more. And I feel like that's what happens a lot in the Carl series, is that the first book really sets up the world and we're like, okay, this is a goofy concept. We're in a dungeon crawler, we're in a video game now. And a lot of people end the first Carl book going, okay, well, that was fun, I guess. I don't know how I feel about the humor. I don't know how I feel about certain aspects of this. And then the series becomes so much more and evolves over time into so many more subjects and covers such interesting social topics. And I feel like When the Wolf Comes Home does that in a very, very succinct way in a standalone, as opposed to the series that the Carl series is, of which there's 8 out now. And I know not everybody is super into an 8-book series, but if you are also somebody who's watching a Dungeon Crawler Carl book recommendation videos, I assume that you're okay with series. So I do have some coming up later. Then I want to recommend The Circle. This is a book I read over a decade ago, so forgive me if I'm a little hazy on some of the topics. But this is very much one where everybody has this obsession with becoming televised, as in like live streaming their entire life nonstop, and it becomes so ingrained in the culture that there are people who have gone fully transparent, I believe is a term that they use, and they are live streaming their lives 24/7 every single day. There is no secrets in their life. And I thought this had such interesting political and just social commentary in general back when it was written. I would love to reread this one, but this is a sci-fi that has stuck with me throughout the years because I also feel like that's kind of what happens in Carl, in which everybody's life is now put on display. Everybody who survived the apocalypse that the aliens caused, their life is now put on display in a video game that is also like a reality TV show for the universe. And that very much reminded me of The Circle. Next up, we have a little bit more of a hard sci-fi, but I know it's a very introductory series for a lot of people when it comes to sci-fi, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I read the original trilogy. I will preface this by saying I have not read past the original trilogy because I read them back when they first released, and I never read Iron Gold. So, with that caveat, I do think this is a great intro to sci-fi in general if you would like to dip your toe into more like hard sci-fi, or if you're somebody who's coming from fantasy and reading mostly fantasy books and want to dip your toe into sci-fi, I've seen several people do that with the series, and I agree it is a great intro to that. I will say the best part about Red Rising, in my opinion, is the characters, and I feel like that very much translates to people who enjoy the Carl series, because we all love that series because of Carl and Donut. That is the reason most people are so obsessed with the series, because we just want to see them succeed. We love the character development that has happened over the series, and I feel like Red Rising does that also very well. Next up, we have The Passengers by John Mars. I have an entire John Mars recommendation video that is several years old now, so I don't have all of his new ones in there. But this also reminds me of it in the sense that this is more of a car chase, but in a sci-fi aspect. It is a world where there are self-driving cars, but one of them gets hijacked by hackers who are trying to get something out of a corporation. And I feel like that is very reminiscent of what is going on in some of the later books in Carl. I'm not going to give any spoilers for that, but that is a subject that very much comes up in the series. And I also very much enjoyed that in The Passengers. This is also a standalone version of that if you are more interested in just dipping your toes into one book as opposed to an 8-book series. Then I have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This is one of my favorite sci-fis of all time. This is my favorite first contact sci-fi that I've probably ever read. I also have a slight bias. I am somebody who has followed Hank and John Green on their YouTube channel and read all of John's books for well over 15 years now. So I was very excited when Hank was coming out with a book, and I was also very excited that it was actually really good. This is a world where a bunch of statues pop up all over the world inexplicably overnight, very similar to The Measure, which I mentioned earlier. Nobody knows how they got there. There's no footage of them showing up, and it's the world trying to figure out what these statues are, and it turns out that they might be alien in origin. And I know Carl is not necessarily a first contact story, although technically is first contact because nobody knew that the aliens existed, but the aliens knew we existed. And I feel like that is also explored very much in The Absolutely Remarkable Thing duology as well. In a similar vein, I have Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I also read this well over a decade ago. Some of the details are a little hazy, I'll be honest. But this is a story where a little girl falls into the hand of a giant that it seems mechanical in nature, and they find out that there are these giant mechanical creatures, robots, unsure, in the ground. And this story in particular is told in transcripts, which I feel like is very reminiscent of the AI in the Dungeon Crawler Carl universe. So if you're someone who is more into mixed media, I feel like this is an excellent version of mixed media used in sci-fi very, very well. Because that is also something that the Carl series is very good at, that Matt Dinniman is very good at writing these overlays of text like you would find in a video game. That's how mixed media feels to me a lot when I read it in any other book. And then last for the books, I have A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. If you are somebody who thinks Dungeon Crawler Crawler is very stressful, but you're too addicted to it and you want something that is much softer sci-fi, much more cozy sci-fi, if you're a cozy fantasy reader or any reader of that kind, this is a story in which we all have gone out into the cosmos. It is very normal that humans have adapted to space travel and ways to do it safely. And this one explores a lot more of the character development of interacting with other alien creatures. And I'm just going to leave it at that. If you like all of the creatures in Dungeon Crawler Carl, but want a representation of that at much lower stakes than the Carl series, I do recommend Becky Chambers' trilogy. I have only read the first two. The first one is my favorite. And if you stuck around for the end of this video, I am also going to recommend Team STARKID's Hatchetfield trilogy, which are also sci-fi and also multiverse. And I'm going to leave it at that. The first one being The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, which is now available through a digital download. It will be up on YouTube on July 4th. That one is a remount of a show they did back in 2018. And then Black Friday and Nerdy Prudes Must Die are the other two shows in the trilogy, and it is my favorite representation of sci-fi and horror in the theater realm that I have ever seen, and I will always recommend it. I also feel like a thing that STARKID is very good at is having a lot of social commentary in their shows, which I also feel like ties back into Carl and the Carl series. That is the reason most of us love the series so much, is that Matt Dinniman manages to put in so much social commentary about armies and being in a military and being forced to perform and being online or live at all times in a way that you never wanted to be. And I feel like all of those aspects of reality TV are very well covered in the Carl series. And I feel like Matt Dinniman does it just as well, if not better, than many of these other books that I have mentioned in this video. But those are all of my recommendations. If you are interested in any of these, please let me know which one you agree with or are interested in now that I have mentioned it in the comments down below. If you don't know what to say, leave me the cat emoji in the comments down below for Princess Donut. But thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.